Hello, everyone. Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. So I came up with this topic just the other day. I have chickens, of course. And so the picture that I used in this particular thumbnail is of Maisie. Well, Maisie is one of the 3 chickens that have been on the docket for being taken out soon. I was hoping to wait and do all 3 of them at the same time that we take out whatever extra roosters we end up with that we don't find a home for. Well, Maisie just pushed her limits a little too far because she's just a naughty bird. She gets into everything. She's been just laying off and on. She hasn't been a good layer. Neither has her sister. Maisie was more obnoxious, getting up onto my deck, pooping on the deck, pooping in the walkway, getting into different garden areas, pulling down, literally jumping up on pots that I have on shelves and pulling them down and spilling the contents everywhere. I found a fix for that, but then she managed to get into another new garden area that no other chicken, even the ones most likely to get in there, would get into, that I had fenced off, and was tearing stuff up. And that was it. And it's like, well, she's kind of a useless eater. I need to make room because I have 10 chicks that are growing. And pretty soon I'm going to need the space and the feed for them. And so Patrick just went ahead and took her out. So Maisie went into the solar oven with some wild rice and some herbs from the garden. And yeah, tasted pretty good. She was a little tough, but she tastes pretty good. Now the rest of her is being made into broth. So of course, I posted this on social media, and there was only one somewhat negative comment, but it wasn't meant in a mean way like some people can get. Oh, I can't believe you would do that. That's so horrible. But this person made the comment that's like, see right there, that's why I don't have chickens, because once I meet them, I couldn't eat them. And you know what? I get that, because I knew when I first got chickens that this was going to be a tough one. This was going to be tough for me. But the thing is, if a person is wanting to be more self-sufficient, and or somebody is looking at, I want to know where my food is coming from. I want to know whether or not this chicken that I'm going to eat, what has it been fed? How was it treated? Did it have a bunch of injections that I hope that it didn't have, that could be in the meat, and I don't want to get that in my body? If that's what you want, then yes, there's this certain connection you got to have to your food. And whether it be growing a garden or growing animals for meat, our main purpose of having chickens is not for meat, it's for eggs. But obviously when it's time to take them out, we're going to try to do the best we can to make the most out of them. Now, unfortunately, a hen, or any chicken, the older they get, the tougher their meat gets, but they can still be cooked into a broth and still, are fed to the animals, or, to the dogs or whatever animals you have. And here's a trick though that I did learn. I should have done this with her. I thought maybe she was young enough that she wouldn't be that tough, but she was a little over a year old, so she was still a little tough. But the best way to do it is cook it really good, and then do the whole thing where you freeze it, the cooked meat, and then dehydrate it. And then you can take that and powder it up, or just crush it up and use it in other stuff. And I've done that with some really old hens before. And that actually worked. I was surprised. It worked pretty good, even with as terribly tough as that meat was. So I'm not saying it's easy, because I name all my chickens. I can't help it. I do. They all have names. Now, Maisie, I wasn't very fond of. So it wasn't that difficult. But we've had chickens that we've had to take out because they were just old. And I was very, very fond of those chickens. But I know there's a lot of people that have acres and acres and acres of land, and they just let their chickens live out their lives, as long as they have plenty of room to free range where they can get all kinds of food, and you're not having to constantly keep buying feed for chickens that aren't producing. Sure, that's great. But we're trying to do all of this right here, right now, just in this little neighborhood lot. And so it's really important for us to be able to have chickens that are not only not getting into the garden and tearing up our other food and just causing, destruction and mayhem and poop everywhere. We need chickens that are going to produce. So I have 2 chickens right now that are not laying decent eggs. One isn't, just laying every so often, and they're really thin-shelled eggs. It's the same. She's the sister of Maisie. They're both golden comets. And then I have Ruthie. Same thing. She just hasn't been laying in weeks. I don't know what's going on with her. All my Buff Orpingtons are laying great. Isabella, who's half Buff Orpington and half Antonio, once she got over being broody, it only took her a few days to recover, laying every day. Claire, who's 8 years old, laying every day, almost every day. And so I have chickens that are doing great, very, very healthy, laying lots of eggs. So I don't know what the deal is with these 2, and I've shared it before in the chicken video that I did, that it's like, well, I don't really know. I didn't raise these chickens. I don't know where they came from. I don't know what they may have been injected with. Maybe they're just more sickly birds because whatever feed they were given in, when they were starting out their life or whatever, I don't know. What I'm trying to say is I just don't have the space to keep chickens that aren't going to produce and are going to be consistently naughty. I have to replace them with chickens that are going to produce, that are going to give us eggs, or give us eggs that we can turn around and then sell to pay for the feed. So since they don't have as much area to roam and to catch bugs and stuff, they have quite a bit for such a small area, the way I work things out. That's why I have to have a lot of fencing to fence up all the different areas. But this time of year, they have a lot less area than they do during the winter, when they got pretty much all of the backyard and some and the front yard garden. They get that whole front yard garden area, so they don't go through as much much feed then. I got the chicks already just are going through so much feed, and they're not ready to be allowed to roam in the yard area. So yes, again, there's just, you have to make a choice. If it's important to you to know where your food's coming from, then sometimes that's a choice you got to make. If it's important for you to be more self-sufficient, that's just a choice you're going to have to make. It's going to happen. Either your chickens are going to die of old age anyway, or you're going to have to take them out. And sometimes it's better just to go ahead and take them out before they die of old age, because it, can be kind of difficult for them. Congestive heart failure is the most common way that an older chicken's going to die. And it's not fun. You can make it a lot quicker and a lot painless for them. Now, I want to also make sure that I say this before I go on. I meant to say this when I started. Is that no matter what you choose, it's got to be entirely up to you, and you should never, ever, ever, ever feel pressured to do anything the way someone else does. But I do still believe that if you're going to be a meat eater, that you should learn that there is a certain connection to your food, a connection that used to be, that's what everybody did. They raised their animals, they ate their animals. The animals had a good life. They were fed well. They were treated properly. And now they're going to become your dinner. So, is it hard, especially when you first get started into doing that, and before you can kind of be able to go, okay, like, I'm going to make this separation now. This is not a pet. This is a product. And I know I gave it a good life. Now it's time for it to finish out its job. Well, when you go down to the store and you buy a chicken, you don't know how that chicken was fed. When you go down to the store and you buy that beef or whatever it is, whatever kind of meat that you're buying, or even those eggs, you have no idea how those animals were treated. And they may say that, oh, they're free of antibiotics or they're free of this, but you still don't know for certain what all they may or may not have been injected with or fed. So you're taking a chance that way. So it's really about what's going to be most important to you. Being more self-sufficient, it's not easy. It's work. And it takes sometimes difficult choices. But isn't that what we have to deal with just about anything? If you're going to have a job, there's always going to be hard things you got to deal with in the job, that you have to earn money so that you can go buy that chicken at the store. So it's a balancing act. You got to decide which thing is more important to you. And so the same applies, though, to self-sufficiency, to anything else you choose to do. If you want to have a skill, you're going to have to take the time to learn that skill. And for some people, learning certain skills can come just like that. And for some people, it can be a little harder work. You know, as a dance teacher and a martial arts teacher through the years, I had students that really struggled to learn certain types of moves of all ages. But what I often found is the ones, okay, let me go back. I also had the ones that everything just seemed to come easy for them. They could just catch on to stuff. But generally speaking, what I'd often see is the ones who were naturally gifted to pick up on stuff, they didn't seem to really appreciate the gifts that they had. And they really didn't do much with them. But the ones who struggled and worked hard to get past whatever it was that they were having an issue with and having a hard time grasping, and then one day they finally grasp it, and then they get that joy of accomplishment, they were the ones more likely to push ahead, and not just in dance, not just in martial arts, but in other areas of their life, because now they had that confidence. When you do that, when you make that choice, and it's hard, you got to work through those things, there is not only the sense of accomplishment, and you realize that I can do this. Now you know that you can make this thing or repair that thing. So when you have a garden, when you have farm animals, when you have whatever it is that you are working on, a rainwater catchment system, maybe some solar power or wind power or whatever it may be, there's always going to be work involved. It's like Zach always says, when you have your solar power or whatever source of non-public power that you're going with, you then become your own electrician. And no one knows that better than us. Well, I shouldn't say no one knows it better, but I can tell you, we know this, right? Because we've had the solar power for quite a long time. And Patrick's the one that does the work and the maintenance on it and the upgrading. Same thing with the rainwater catchment. So you take on all of these jobs, but that is part of being self-sufficient. Now, I want to stress again that we all have to start somewhere, and we have to start with what's important to us, and we should never feel pressured into doing it all. We don't have honeybees. I still think off and on about doing it, but we would have to set up a good place for them that they could stay sheltered from the heavy rains. Around here, you just have to do that. Or you can, the rains would totally flood out their hives. And so we haven't gotten that far yet. We may someday. We don't have cattle. We don't have sheep. We just have chickens, and we have our gardens. Of course, we have our rainwater catchment. We have our solar power, but we're not 100% dependent on our solar power either. We still have public power. I was going to get to like the garden areas. So you're putting in a garden. Like for me, we started doing little bits of gardening, growing tomatoes and stuff years and years ago. Growing some flowers, and, it was just kind of let's do this. Let's at least get tomatoes, because tomatoes are never good in the store. Let's grow our own tomatoes. So that was like one of the big things. I wasn't saving tomato seeds. I would just buy plants, the starts at the store when they'd come available every year. And then I'd put those in the greenhouse. Then one year I finally decided it's time for me to start growing tomatoes from seed and find out how to do it. And it took, though I always had a success of some sort, it was finding what would work best for me in growing those seeds, where to start them, how to start them. Do I follow everybody else's example, which never was a great, I don't like the whole thing of one little tiny tomato plant and all these tiny little stars. I just throw them all into one thing. I do divide them by the type, like aromas, and this year I'm growing mortgage lifters and the purples and the black brandywines. And so they're divided up like that, just so I know when I go to put them in the ground. It took me a few years to really find the best system that was going to work for me for saving the seeds. But at first it just started out with buying some starts. Then eventually learning how to save seeds and learning the best way to save the seeds. There can be several different ways to do that. Learning the best way for me to start them and then move them to the greenhouse and then transplant them into the ground. And everybody's going to do it different. And so it's okay to do things in steps. It's okay to do things your own way. This is important. You get a lot of people that try to convince people this is the only way to grow this or that. No, it's not. Because that way that they're doing it is probably not going to work as well for you, depending on your climate or your space or whatever. And your time obviously has to be very important. And so how many things do you have? How much time do you have that you can add so much on your plate? So right now, I only have the time or the energy or the stress level that I'm not going to worry about saving any seeds this year. That was me the first year that we really started getting, let's try planting a whole bunch of this stuff, a whole bunch of different things. Patrick, you should save those seeds. And I was like, nope. I'm not messing with that this year. I do not want to mess with that this year because I'm not ready to take on that task too. Is it a hard task? No. But I knew that everything was going to be a little bit different according to what it was, and I'd have to learn about it. And I wasn't ready for that. At the time that I was doing that, I was still teaching dance and martial arts too. And I still had kids at home. I didn't want to take on more than I was ready for. So you also have to balance it out according to your own stress level. I really feel for people who just feel so weighed down when they feel the need or the pressure to start being more self-sufficient. They start watching all these YouTube channels that have been doing it for years and years, doing all this stuff, and they've been adding to what they've done through the years, and they think they got to be just like that, and so they feel like they got to take it all on at once. You just can't do that to yourself. I wouldn't be one that wants to pressure someone into, you need to raise your own chickens, your own livestock, and you need to learn how to dispatch them and do that. That's going to be up to you. However, if you have a desire to do that, this is the point I'm trying to make. If you have a desire to do that, you're going to have to know it's not going to all be full of fun, cutesy stuff. There's going to be those hard things that you're going to have to face. Somebody had to do it with the meat that you bought in the store. Somebody had to save the seeds and then grow them and, the plants and harvest them and put it in the store. Somebody had to do that. So you have to decide, is that a job you want to take on, or would you rather just not have that stress? So again, it's got to be up to you. You just have to decide what's important to you and face the reality that it's not all sunshine and rainbows. It's not all unicorns and Skittles. Sometimes it's tough. And I knew that when I got chickens. I knew there would be that point, and I wasn't looking forward to it, but I wanted to believe I was tough enough to do it. And when my very first chicken died of old age, I cried, even though she was my least favorite chicken out of my 7 Buff Orpingtons. There's that feeling of responsibility. Was I wrong to just go ahead and let her die naturally? There was all this stuff that I was going through. And now I believe that, okay, now I know what to look for, because there still will be chickens I'm going to keep until they're too old. Because if I get a good layer, I'm going to keep that good layer. I mean, I can see that, I can tell already, Isabella, who's a product of one of my Buff Orpingtons, and Antonio, she's an excellent chicken. Every day she seems to get better. I couldn't believe how quickly she started laying, and then how quickly she went into being broody, and then how quickly she started laying again after coming out of that. And she's sweet, and she's cuddly, she's well behaved, and she's a nice heavy bird. So I want to keep her as long as possible, because she's going to be a good mama. She's going to, if I do get to a point where I'm just sticking eggs under her when she goes broody, I can tell she's going to be a good mama. So I'm going to probably want to get more chicks from her, just like I want to get more chicks from Claire if I can. It's like I'm thinking about doing another hatching later in the season while Claire is still laying, because I don't know how much longer she's got since she's 8. I would really like to get more hens from her, because that's where Isabella came from. But again, in the process, I've got to take out all of the chickens. I don't have room. I'm going to have 20 chickens right now. 10 chicks and 10 adults. And that 20 chickens in our little spot, that's a lot. Obviously, all of the extra roosters will be gone. Hopefully, I have at least 3 hens out of there that can replace the 3 that have to go. The one that's already was made into dinner. Let's see, 8 on her one night. Use the rest of the meat to make chicken Alfredo, and then now she's becoming broth. So I'm getting my money's worth out of her. That's for darn sure. That's important. As difficult as that may be, it's wasn't, like I said, it wasn't that hard, because she kind of irritated the heck out of me anyway. When you start getting into doing different things for yourself, whether it be a garden, raising livestock, having some kind of rainwater collection, having some kind of alternate power source, there's always, I did already touch on this, but I want to say it again, there's always things that will need to be repaired or added onto. And so learning to be creative and learning the skills you're going to need to be able to repair those things yourself, so you don't have to pay somebody else to do it. These are also the kind of things you're going to have to consider, because it's not like you're going to put in a chicken coop and a chicken yard, put in a garden, and everything's just going to take care of itself. There's always going to be work that has to be done. There's going to be a point in our lives where it's like, I can't keep doing all of this stuff anymore. I realize this. But I hope that I can pass this education that I have on to others, so that, my children, my grandchildren, maybe my great-grandchildren, so that they can have this knowledge and skill to take care of themselves as well. Which is one of the main reasons I started my YouTube channel, was to pass on what I've learned while I'm still learning it, because I am still learning all the time. We all have something that we can teach to others. And so maybe we can't physically do a lot of this stuff. Maybe we could at one time, but we have the knowledge, and we still have value because we can pass that knowledge on to others. And hopefully, if it's others in your family, or if it's younger people in your family, those people can then help you. Now they have this knowledge because you've taught them. Now they can help you by doing this stuff. Learning how to cook and bake for yourself, that's a self-sufficient thing too. And you don't have to go right into sourdough making. Sourdough, yes, I realize like it's the oldest. I get that. And a lot of people are just really pushing the sourdough thing. But if it's not for you, it's not for you. Just like fermented food. A lot of people push the fermented food. I love some fermented food, but not all the time. So start with whatever you got. And I do absolutely agree with learning how to work with sourdough, or even just like using my fermentation starter, which is pretty much the same idea as sourdough. It's just a little bit different, but it does take more time, and you're going to have a little bit different flavor than using a dry yeast you can buy from the store. But what if you can't get that dry yeast from the store? What if it's not available? Well, knowing how to make a sourdough starter was super easy to do. And then start working with that sourdough and learning all the techniques. I was like, when I see all this stuff now, it's like everybody's got these, well, you got to have, it's like this big scientific, formula. And it's like, oh, good grief. That's just going to scare people away from making sourdough bread. Just keep it simple, for crying out loud. And you learn as you go. You start finding, maybe if I add a little butter to this, or maybe if I use milk instead of water, or water instead of milk, you'll find what kind of textures and types that you like. I played with sourdough. I do some of the stuff now and then, but like I said, I prefer using a dry yeast. I still love making my bread from scratch, but I still love using a dry yeast, but I know how to use my fermentation starter if dry yeast is not available, which I keep a lot of. Yeah. Thanks for coming in. Take care and God bless. Love y'all.